Hello, ghouls. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 8 of the Shrouded in Darkness podcast, where we shine a light on the cases that the world forgot. I'm your true crime-obsessed host, Marlena. Before we get into today's story, I should mention that this one is brutal, and it remains unsolved. And ghouls, I am very invested in this one, and because of that, I would really appreciate any feedback or theories or thoughts that you have. Also, full disclosure, I have a lot of opinions on this one, and of course, I'll be sharing those, and all the more reason I would love to hear from you. So today's research comes from the Morbid Podcast, CNN, NBC 10 Philadelphia, Crime Timeline, and the Women in Crime podcast. Today's case takes us to Philadelphia. Allow me to introduce you to Ellen Ray Greenberg. Born June 23, 1983 in New York City to Joshua and Sandra Greenberg. Ellen was the only child in a very close-knit family, and in sometime around 1994, the family would move to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Ellen was known to be a very bubbly and joyful person to be around. Ellen attends Penn State, where she receives a degree in communications, but she would actually go back to school because she didn't feel like this was where she was supposed to be. She then attends Temple University and earns her education degree. This is what would be her true calling, because she was so great with kids. And this would lead to her dream job as a first grade school teacher. In 2008, Ellen accepts a blind date offer from a friend, and this is where she meets Samuel Goldberg. Sam was maybe a year older than Ellen, and he worked in television production. I believe at one point he worked for NBC. The two continued dating, and in 2010, while on a trip in California, Sam pops the question, and Ellen, of course, happily says yes, so the wedding planning commences. The couple plans to marry in August 2011. Sometime after this, Ellen confides in her close family and friends of some overwhelming anxiety. So not only is normal living hard, but she works in education with very young children, and she's trying to plan a wedding that's months away. She starts struggling to sleep. She appears noticeably off to those that know her. She wasn't her usual bubbly self. She seemed more withdrawn. At one point, she even mentioned moving back in with her parents. It's her father that suggests she see a psychiatrist, which she agrees to. And she sees a psychiatrist maybe 3 times over the span of a couple weeks. The doctor prescribes Klonopin for her anxiety and Ambien for sleep, both of which seem to help. An added note about these specific medications: both do have side effects that involve suicide, but Ellen's psychiatrist did not feel that she was in any danger of hurting herself. Suicide was just never on the doctor's radar, or the family's for that matter. So let's look at the timeline. It's Wednesday, January 26th, 2011. At this time, Ellen is 27 years old. She's 7 months away from her wedding to Sam. At this point, they've already sent out their save the date announcements. It's that close. The couple live in a 6th floor apartment in the Manayunk neighborhood of Philadelphia. Another quick note, Ellen's mother says that she actually visited a couple weeks prior to this, and everything seemed to be going great. There were a couple, those bouts of anxiety that Ellen had expressed, but that was it. Everything else seemed great. So on this date in January, again, that's January 26th, 2011, Ellen's school day, her work day, is cut short due to snow and an incoming blizzard. On her way home, she stops by a store. She fills her car up with gas, which is totally normal for someone when snow is coming. She's home by about 1:30. Throughout the day, she texts her mother and some friends, again, everything appearing normal. One of the last communications we know of was with her mom at about 4:32 p.m. Now, this next series of events comes from Sam's viewpoint. So Sam arrives home at about 4:45 p.m. and he leaves for the gym shortly after. Something to know that the gym is actually within the apartment complex, so it's just a walk, to get to it. So he's gone for maybe 30 minutes, so we're now at about 5:20, 5:30 in the evening. Now remember these times, these are important. So when he gets back to the apartment, again, it's about 5:20, 5:30, he finds their door is locked. And now this isn't just the normal like doorknob or deadbolts. This isn't something a key is used to unlock. It's actually the extra security swing bar that's fastened. And this is what you would find basically in a hotel door. So this is something that, we assume it can only be done from within. You can only lock it and unlock it from within the apartment. So for about 22 minutes, Sam tries to get Ellen to let him in. He yells, he texts, he calls, no response. And honestly, I can't imagine what will be going through one's mind during this. I mean, he was only gone for maybe 30 minutes and she was fine before he left. So his next step is to go to the apartment security guard to see if he can help in any way. Well, the guard isn't able to break the lock, but Sam says that he comes with him back to the room. After finding no other option, Sam forces his way in by breaking the lock. And this is when he finds Ellen's lifeless body on the kitchen floor, sitting upright against the kitchen cabinet. Again, remember, this is all from his viewpoint. So it's about 6:30 p.m. when Sam calls 911. They ask him to do CPR and he questions it. He's unsure because maybe he's in shock or maybe he already thinks she's gone by this point, that it's pointless. I don't know, but he questions it, but he does eventually move toward Ellen's body. And this is where he says he sees a knife still sticking out of her chest. So obviously he's told, don't touch anything, to wait. EMTs and police arrive on the scene. At 6:40 p.m. on this day, Ellen Greenberg is pronounced deceased. During all this, Sam notifies his parents, who in turn notify Ellen's parents. Sadly, her parents are 2 hours away and they're snowed in, so they can't get there quickly. Before we move on to the crime scene, I want to share a few things that contradict Sam's version. Remember, I told you to pay attention to those times that I was specifying. Now, take this as you will. I mean, it's just what I've been able to read. It's what I found in the public reports, the case files, and everything that I had access to. So first, we look at the swing bar lock that, Sam said he had to force his way in. Well, the picture of the swing bar lock shows that it's actually mostly intact. There are 2 screws that are furthest from the bar side. So this would be the screws on the door side of the bar. They're partially pulled out, but that's the only damage I can see. Second, there are still images from the apartment video surveillance. So I believe these images come from the ground floor, and you can tell that it's right in front of the elevator. So imagine like a lobby. In one image, you see Sam standing there in front of the elevator. The timestamp reads 6:32, and he's alone. This was when he was supposedly calling 911. At 6:42, we see the first responder standing at that same elevator. Just the timing is off. In regards to Sam's 911 call, I have listened to the recording. He's very obviously panicky, out of breath. He keeps calling Ellie's name. He tells the first operator that she's on the floor and blood is everywhere. He's eventually transferred to a rescue line, and he explains the whole situation again. They ask him to look at her chest and see if she's still breathing. Well, to the rescue person, he confirms that she's on her back, not sitting up like he originally said, mind you. This is also when he sees the knife and tells the operator that's sticking out of her chest. He says that it's right in her heart. He says that maybe she stabbed herself. Maybe she fell. Now, I don't want to read too much into this because I know everyone reacts to situations like this differently. Timing could have been off. He could have been in shock. We don't know. We weren't there, obviously. I would like to mention what I have seen in those crime photos. Now, the photos do not show Ellen. They show computer-generated images. And I know I haven't gotten to this part yet, but Ellen was stabbed 20 times. So in the photos, you can see the kitchen where she was. And for her to have 20 stab wounds in some pretty severe places, there's not a lot of blood in the scene. Now, I know Sam says there's blood everywhere when he calls 911, and maybe to him it was. I don't know. But to me, it was not a lot of blood. Okay, so let's look at the actual crime scene. Ellen is wearing a hooded sweatshirt, sweatpants, and boots. Not sure how important that is, but that's what she was wearing. We have the knife that's in her body, but there are also 2 clean knives in the sink. There's no obvious sign of forced entry, except for, Sam supposedly breaking the door down to get in. There's no indication that Ellen tried to flee. There's nothing helpful on the balcony, no footprints in the snow. Plus, remember, they're on the 6th floor. There is a half-made fruit salad on the kitchen counter, which appears to have been interrupted. No defensive wounds on the victim, no signs of a struggle. The blood at the scene is only around Ellen, like her body, and there's even a white washcloth near her body, or possibly even in her hand. There's absolutely no blood on this washcloth. The police interview neighbors. No one heard anything odd until Sam, was trying to get into the apartment. He was yelling. He was trying to get Ellen's attention. So there's nothing unusual up to this point. Even security footage from the complex shows nothing strange. No one coming in or out that shouldn't already be there. Unfortunately, though, there are no cameras in the hallway or in the gym area, but we do have Sam's key fob for the gym that does put him where he said he was. It shows him entering the gym. One more thing on the crime scene, and there's a reason behind this, so I'm saying it. There's no suicide note. There's nothing suggesting suicide. According to the police, though, they say it looks like suicide because there's no forced entry, there's no defensive wounds, there's no signs of anyone else being there. Plus, you add in her mental health, the 2 medications she was on. Their opinion was suicide was the only option. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's just what the police are saying right now. So let's move on to the autopsy. Now, this is conducted the following day, so January 27th. Ellen had been stabbed 20 times in her chest, stomach, head, and neck. 10 of those wounds were to the back of her neck and head area. 2 went directly into her brain. The only drugs in her system were her known medications. And the medical team also notate that there were 11 bruises along the right side of Ellen's body, specifically her right arm, right side, and right leg. Now, the bruises were all at different healing stages. They were different colors. Means they happened at different times. The bruises she had could easily be explained if Ellen was into contact sports or something like that, but we know she wasn't. The knife that was still in her chest was at a depth of 4 inches. There is also a wound to her scalp that resembles a slash mark. And the only DNA at the scene belongs to Ellen. Not even Sam's DNA shows up, even though he lives in that apartment. So bearing all this in mind, the evidence and lack of, the interviews, the circumstances surrounding the day, it was ruled as a suicide. Now, there are conflicting reports that homicide may have been listed first, but then changed to suicide. I've seen a couple different things, so I'm not entirely sure. But ultimately, the final result is suicide. Honestly, there's so much in this case that's confusing and doesn't really make sense. But this is also why I chose to share this case. Ellen's story needs to be spread. Her story needs to be told. Her case needs to be solved. So as always, there are some interesting tidbits of information I felt I should share. There's quite a few oddities in my opinion. So the security guard was questioned, and he commented on Sam's attire, saying that, he was wearing boots and didn't appear to be in gym clothes. Now, this could mean a lot of things, But we have a key fob that shows Sam did enter the gym. And, we know that the gym was located somewhere along the apartment complex. So if maybe he had to walk outside, then he would have used boots for walking in the snow. Or maybe he even had a change of clothes for the gym. I'm not sure. We don't have clear information on this. But also, speaking of the guard, his statement confirms he did not walk up to the apartment with Sam. He's not allowed to leave his post, so there's no way he would have went to the 6th floor. So the door being forced open, one report says there was no forced entry, which obviously contradicts this. Another report says that only one screw bolt was missing or was kind of out of the locking mechanism, which fits with the picture I saw. But if Sam did in fact have to break the door in, there would be more damage, even if it's just to the lock. Maybe even the hinges. I don't know, but it's weird. Now, one of the earlier reports stated there was evidence on Ellen's laptop suggesting she looked up suicide methods. But later on, this is found to be false. There were no searches, nothing showing she tried looking up suicide methods or anything. Also, I want to look back at the timeline for 911. If Sam returned home at 5:30, struggled with the door for 20 plus minutes, and didn't call 911 until 6:22, what was he doing in those 30 or so minutes in between? Now, according to the Morbid Podcast, one of my favorite podcasts, by the way, Sam made 2 other phone calls before he even called 911. They said that one call was to his parents and one call was to his uncle, who happened to be a lawyer. Okay, so do you remember the 2 knives I mentioned that were in the kitchen sink? There's no evidence showing those were ever tested. Okay, now let's look at a couple theories and outside opinions. We'll start with reviewing Ellen's condition. She'd been overly stressed, even to the point of wanting to move in with her parents. She was acting differently, more closed off. She had unexplainable bruises. Could these be indicators of an abusive relationship? A lot of times people don't really know what's going on behind closed doors. Maybe this is one of those cases. There are several factors that contradict the suicide ruling. The day she was found, she filled her car with gas. She was in the middle of fixing food. She loved her job as a teacher. She had a wedding to look forward to. Her own psychiatrist and her family all said there was no way she would be suicidal. And let's take into account the stab wounds that were to the back side of her neck, her head, her brain. These are areas that would be super difficult to do yourself. And honestly, I mean, if you could contort yourself to do that, how would you come up with enough force to cause the kind of damage she had? Obviously, I think we all can agree that this being a suicide is very, well, it's ridiculous. Let's just be honest. Despite the police opinions, the evidence suggests someone did this to Ellen. And Ellen's family, her parents, they would be the biggest supporter of this theory. And guys, they have fought to get justice for their daughter, which is why this episode is nowhere near done yet. So Sandra and Joshua, her parents, they hire their own team to investigate the case. This happened somewhere between 2012 and 2013. And the investigators, the people that they hired, are some very popular names that some of you may have heard of before. There's Dr. Cyril Wecht, a forensic pathologist. There's Dr. Wayne Ross, a forensic neuropathologist. And then there's Tom Brennan, who is a private investigator. Now, these 3 people that I just named are some of the experts that were associated with cases we all know, like the JFK assassination, the John Benet Ramsey case. They helped with these cases. Okay, so here's what we learned from them. They strongly believe that the original investigation was greatly flawed, all the way from investigating to the scene, all the way to the autopsy. So the neck wounds alone prove that Ellen couldn't have done this by herself, or to herself. They determined the wounds were not self-inflicted, and there was even evidence of strangulation due to some scratch marks that were never before mentioned. There's also the possibility that the scene was staged. One big tip for this part is that there was a line of blood from Ellen's nostril to the back of her ear, and it was a horizontal line showing she would have been lying on her side during at least part of the attack. Otherwise, this would have absolutely defied gravity. So her body had to have been moved to the sitting position. And just want to go back and reflect that Sam first said she was laying on her back. And then when the investigators or the EMTs got there, she was sitting up against a cabinet. So, that's contradicting. So you have that story not working. You have the weird blood flow. And also remember, there's not a lot of blood on the scene. Also important to know, she suffered a severe spinal cord injury. Investigator Brennan found a piece of Ellen's spinal cord still in the medical examiner's office, untested, years after her death. The testing on this piece showed it had been pierced and severed, which ultimately means when this injury occurred, Ellen would have experienced excruciating pain, followed by numbness. And then she would not have been able to carry out the remainder of her suicide. We're looking at 20 stab wounds, ghouls, and a major one being to her chest, where that knife was found, 4 inches deep. So this new team had a theory, and a believable one. Someone surprised Ellen and attacked her from behind, interrupting the making of her fruit bowl. The first stab would have incapacitated her, whether it was into her spinal cord, into her brain. Either one, she wouldn't have been able to react properly. But this also explains why there were no defensive wounds. She couldn't physically fight back. She couldn't defend herself. Also, let's look at something else that was brought to the table. The swing bar lock on the apartment door. Guess what? YouTube has a ton of videos on how to unlock this from the outside. Simple, super easy tricks too, by using a string or a rubber band or an index card. It's absolutely possible to undo the lock from the outside. So back to Ellen's parents, Sandra and Josh. They have never stopped fighting for their daughter in her case. They've tried refuting her autopsy reports. They've requested police reports, crime scene photos. They've tried insisting on re-examinations. And for the most part, they've always been denied. They filed a couple lawsuits too, or maybe even a lot. I've not been able to get clear information on how many lawsuits they've tried. And guys, this isn't about the money. It's never been about the money. They want to keep their daughter's case open. They want it to be, stay in the mind of people, no matter what it took. For example, in October of 2019, her parents filed a civil lawsuit against the original medical examiner, requesting the suicide ruling be removed, and if nothing else, just be listed as undetermined. That alone would help the investigation be reopened. Also in 2019, a petition was started on change.org. And now I've mentioned this website before for a previous case with Jeanette De Palma. There's a page for Ellen as well. It's called Justice for Ellen Greenberg. This one has over 175,000 signatures. There's also contact information for the mayor. So they're trying everything they can to make something happen, to get justice. Now, there have been a few more case updates over the last few years. In 2021, photogrammetry was used to further investigate Ellen's wounds. And from what I gather, this science basically, it has the capability of rendering a 3D image. So for Ellen's case, they further confirmed that it was improbable for her to stab herself with the force it would have taken to create the wounds she had. In February of 2025, the original assistant medical examiner that performed Ellen's autopsy, they signed a sworn statement saying they no longer believed her death was suicide. The wording used is that it should be classified as otherwise, which still doesn't say homicide, but at least it was changed from suicide. Around the same time, the city of Philadelphia reached a settlement with the Greenbergs, the parents, agreeing to re-examine her death under their current chief pathologist. In September of the same year, Hulu released a 3-part true crime docuseries about Ellen's case, and this is called Death in Apartment 603. Now, I have not watched this yet. I wanted to go strictly on what I could find in like public reports and stuff. But this docuseries obviously would give more attention to the investigation. In October, the Philadelphia's chief medical examiner completed their official re-examination of Ellen's death. They reaffirmed the suicidal ruling. Their belief was there's no evidence of a struggle, no evidence of another party being involved, because remember, only her DNA was around. So they, again, chose to focus on her having anxiety and mental health issues, and that's what they used to explain her manner of death. I feel one of Greenberg's attorneys said it best, and this was from William Trask. By ignoring key evidence that contradicts suicide, like the extensive 3D photogrammetry proving Ellen could not self-inflict all the wounds, unexplained bruises, the missing surveillance footage, an intact lock, accounts of a toxic relationship, Simon builds a flimsy case on distorted portrayals of Ellen's mental health, propped up by cynical distortions of Ellen's managed anxiety, a condition widely experienced daily by over 40 million Americans. This report is an embarrassment to the city and an insult to Ellen and her family. Ghouls, I 100% agree with this. In January of this year, so January 2026, federal prosecutors got involved. The U.S. attorneys started issuing subpoenas, and as of now, the last I read, the federal inquiry focuses on how the departments handled the case. And I get they're not focusing on Ellen's death or even the ruling, but this could still bring light to the case, the discrepancies, the poor handling. Lastly, in case you're wondering, Sam Goldberg is living in Manhattan with his wife Caroline and their 2 children. He still works in the television industry as a producer. So he's happy and living life. I know I've already shared a lot of my own thoughts on this case, but I just want to reiterate. We're looking at a case where a woman was stabbed 20 times. A woman that showed no threat of suicide. And being stabbed 20 times in most cases is usually an indication of a crime of passion. Yet we're not looking at the person closest to her. We're not looking at any suspects from what I can gather. This one blows my mind because none of it makes sense. And don't worry, I'm going to keep my eyes on this one. It needs justice. Ellen deserves justice. Her family deserves justice. And I could probably keep going, but I'm going to wrap this up. As always, if you have any details worth sharing, if you have your own theories, if you have your own information, please reach out. You can connect with us on WordPress and Instagram. Just search for us by looking up the Shrouded in Darkness podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If there's a case from your hometown that deserves attention, send it to us. We love learning about new cases. And you can tune in next week as we dive into the mysterious case of Shane Spranger. Until next time, ghouls, remember, the truth is always hiding in the darkness.